Hey everyone, it's Billy. Coming outside to do video today because my kids are home on summer break and it's impossible to record in there. So I thought I would take a little walk through my neighborhood on this hot Nagoya day and talk about today's poem by Bankei Yōtaku. So come with me and we'll talk about the poem and then a little bit about the poet and then a few thoughts I had about the poem. Booch! Our poem for today by Bankei Yōtaku. If we read out the Japanese, and I'm just doing this off of my head, so if I make a mistake, please forgive me. But it's sorry, just walking through here. Furuoke no soko nuke hatete sangai ni ichienso no waka areba koso. And the meaning of that is basically something like when you take out the bottom of the bucket, you can see the ring of the void in the three worlds. So that's the Japanese and the English. Let's talk about Bankei a little bit, the poet, and then we can talk about the poem itself a little bit more and my thoughts. Oh god, it's hot. Let's get some shade here. I also feel weird about talking at a shrine. It's kind of supposed to be a quiet place, so I apologize. So Bankei, he lived in the 17th century, and he was the son of a samurai without a patron, and his father was also a Confucian scholar. And I believe when he was a boy, he got his kind of first dip into the spiritual world when he was learning in class from one of the Confucian classics called The Great Learning. And there was a line that said, the way to great learning is through practicing or polishing the bright virtue. And he had a question for his teacher. He wanted to know what bright virtue meant. And the teacher couldn't really explain. And so Bankei, as you know, kids often do, they kind of latch on and they want to know why. In this case, Bankei wanted to know more about, exactly what is this bright virtue. And so he started neglecting school, and he was just focusing on this question. And eventually, I think he was 11, and his older brother kicked him out of the house because he wasn't going to school, which I guess is some 17th century tough love. And so Bankei went to study at the local temple, and he couldn't find answers there. He started practicing chanting the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, the chanting like the Pure Land sect does to the Buddha Amitabha, and didn't really find any answers there. He actually took this practice up again later in life, and he remarked that he didn't find answers, he just found he had a sore butt from sitting and chanting all day. And so he went on a kind of a spiritual pilgrimage. He went to Kyoto, Osaka, I believe he went to Kyushu, and he was studying Shingon Buddhism and eventually Zen Buddhism, trying to find his answer. He had a funny story. Was when he was, I think, just 11 or 12, maybe 13, one of his mentor monks built up a little hermitage for him, his own little private hut, so he could study and try to find answers himself through seclusion, and it didn't work. So he continued, though, practicing, eventually settling in kind of with Zen, his master telling him that he was only going to find an answer by looking within. He's not going to find it studying sutras or looking up things in books. And so he pushed himself hard doing Zen meditation, Zazen, and eventually he got tuberculosis. And I guess he was coughing up blood, And he said finally, one night on the brink of death, he was sitting down at night, and he hacked up a big black ball of phlegm on the wall. And that moment he kind of reached his awakening. And he preached something called the unborn. Everything is resolved in the unborn. The unborn to him was kind of the original mind that you got from your parents before you were conditioned by anything. And this was the kind of Zen that he preached for the rest of his life. So that's a little bit about Bankei. I could go in a lot more about his actual practice of the unborn, or his teaching of the unborn. There's a bunch of really good stories about him, but I'm dying outside and getting a lot of stares as I meander around this shrine. So let's talk a little bit about my thoughts on the poem. The poem itself was a little bit difficult to translate at first, because there's a little bit of ambiguity to it, talking about trying to translate the ichienso. Ichienso is, oh, hey flag. Ichienso are the circles that you see kind of in Japanese calligraphy. Sometimes you'll see just a big circle. I'm gonna walk around now to the other shrine. And the circles are supposed to kind of represent, ultimate reality or awakening or emptiness, the void, so to speak. So I translated it as the void. And this was one of the kind of the parts that I was having trouble with. And so the idea of the bucket, you're taking out the bottom of the bucket. It's got so much symbolism and meaning wrapped up into it that it's difficult to translate in a short waka poem. But if you think about a bucket, like, what do you do with a bucket? Well, you carry things around in it, right? You put things in and you carry things around, and it's usually water that you put in. Water also having quite a lot of significance in spiritual practice, Buddhism in general. One idea is that water reflects the moon, and the moon meaning spiritual awakening. So this is the actual local shrine, the closest one to me. The other one's not far away, but. And so the idea of Bankei, he's saying, you've got to take out the bottom of the bucket in order to actually realize the void, the emptiness in the three worlds. So what is he trying to say by that? Well, my interpretation, at least, and this is far from the only one, and maybe not even the most correct one, but when you're holding onto a bucket of water, the water isn't flowing anywhere. It's not moving, and eventually the water stagnates. Water is also quite heavy, and it's a burden to carry. Whereas, Bankei's whole idea of Zen was kind of a Zen of non-doing. There's not anything you have to do in order to have the Buddha mind. Like, you already originally have it, and all of your working and all of your effort is actually kind of contrary to your original enlightenment. And so you've got this bucket, and you're filling it with water, and you're hoping, the water is going to reflect the image of the moon. The water is going to become clear like a mirror and show you your original mind, your enlightenment. But as the water stays in the bucket, it becomes stagnant, it becomes dirty and filled with pollutants. And so you need to constantly be dumping out the water and filling up the water and dumping it out and filling it up and creating a lot of work for yourself. But when you empty out the bottom of the bucket, water would just pass through. Now, you might think, well, that doesn't really make for a bucket. That's, it's a pretty terrible bucket. But the idea of Buddhist teachings in general, they're not supposed to be something that you're holding on to. There's the idea or the story in Buddhism about the teachings being a raft that take you from one shore of ignorance to the shore of enlightenment. And once you get to the shore of enlightenment, you don't carry the raft on your back. You leave the raft on the shore for the next person. So if you've got this bucket and you're constantly filling it up and emptying it out and filling it up and emptying it out, well, the bucket itself is becoming an impediment to your progress. Another idea he talks about taking the bottom out of the bucket, and the bottom kind of reveals the ichienso, the circle, the ultimate meaning. And it's kind of a cute image if you think about it, but like if you take out the bottom of a bucket and then you hold the bucket up to your eyes and look through, like everything is going to be, you know, a circle shape because you're looking through the bucket. So it reveals like the world as a circle. So kind of it's like a very visual metaphor. It's something that you can imagine in your mind quite easily. So in Bankei Zen, you're not supposed to be carrying anything with you. You're not supposed to be burdening yourself with unnecessary effort. You kind of let things pass through, and you realize that that itself, being able to just allow things to come and go, that is returning to your original mind. Bankei talks about not awakening, but kind of returning. Like you were already originally enlightened, and then you kind of learned how not to be enlightened. So when you attain, quote unquote, enlightenment or awakening, you're not gaining anything new. You're just kind of returning back to what you originally were. So those are my thoughts. Sorry for the totally random photography, cinematography. I'm really just trying to narrate as I walk around. Hope that you enjoyed the video. The one that we did yesterday on Ishikawa Takaboku, I got some pretty funny responses. People just confused because it was such like a violent and horrible image for a poem. But if you're interested, go back and watch that. You know, thumbs up and follow, subscribe, do all those good things. And hopefully I will not die of heat stroke on my way back and be around again for another video soon. So thank you very much.